Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to take a look at this weekend's upcoming eclipse in the sign of Libra. It is a solar eclipse that is happening on October 14th, and so that gives us opportunity. That's this Saturday. It gives us an opportunity, although we've looked at the Libran eclipse from a variety of different viewpoints dating back to this summer when the nodes of the moon entered Libra and Aries. With just a couple of days left, I want to take two more looks at this upcoming eclipse. And today we're going to look at it from the standpoint of disappointment and like the feeling that things aren't fair. Most of the time when we think of the sign of Libra, we think about fairness and balance and eloquence and harmony and justice. We don't always think about the fact that Libran, the sign of Libra, is the sign of the scales, can it's a sign that points to karmic harvesting. And for many of us, we're going to have different moments throughout our lives where the outcome is not one that we would consider favorable, and we may even go so far as to feel picked on, or that life is unfair, that somehow we're getting the short end of the stick. It's a very common experience. I think that we can all understand. We've probably all had it at one point or another. Some of us may feel that we've had it more than others. So I want to talk about why this eclipse can bring up the feeling of life being unfair and how we can deal with it. What are some of the things that these ancient wisdom schools who practiced astrology, the Hermeticists, the Platonists, the Stoics, the yogis, what did they say about the presence of karmic justice and the mystery of karma, and what to do when things feel unfair? Because it's a real feeling. And I'm not going to promise you, we're not going to sit here today and say, actually, everything's fair and you just have to adjust your attitude. That will not be the approach we will take, although maybe sometimes that is the appropriate response, but that's not the only thing we're going to say today. So I don't want you guys to hear you're like, I'm being set up for one of those, like, just accept it all, hopefully we'll get a little bit more nuanced with what to do about the feeling of cosmic injustice, or the feeling that somehow what's happened, to us or around us feels unfair. So anyway, that is our agenda for today. Now, tomorrow, I want to also say that we will take another look at the eclipse, and through a totally different point of view, which has to do with when extremes are being tempered, or when things are balancing out, or we're reaping what we've been sown, and there's a feeling of things of a balance being restored in our little universe. And that's going to be a totally different take, and one that will be a little bit more uplifting than today's talk. So just so you know, we will try to balance things out a little bit in true Libran fashion. Anyway, before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel to grow, as you guys know. And if you're new to the channel, I hope you're enjoying it and that you'll subscribe and become a regular around this place. You can find a transcript of any of my daily talks on the website, nightlightastrology.com. And when you're over there right now, we're in the midst of enrollment season for my fall program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. This is our year one course. We have 4 years worth of professional astrology curriculum, but many people take the courses just because this is your hobby or a spiritual practice in your life that you're developing. You can study astrology in the same way that people study yoga or practice music without any ambition to be professional, just because it's something that you love. Or you can study it to become, a practicing professional. Either way, the first year course is called Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, which really points to the fact that the course is a blend of ancient Greek Hellenistic astrology, which you'll get your foundations in this class, alongside of a kind of modern archetypal and psychological sensibility that reflects the kind of diverse schools that I've learned and studied through. At any rate, as you scroll down, you can learn more about the program. There's 30 classes on the year. We go through a variety of different modules, giving you a foundational understanding of ancient astrology. And then as we go, we are breaking out into study sessions with tutors that are there to help you if you need help between the major modules of study. Everything happens through live webinars, but everything is also recorded and kept on a class website. So if you need to, you can take the class at your own pace. You could be there live or not. But we also have an interactive group forum discussion. So if you can't make a live study session after a major unit of study, you could always just ask questions in the forum, and we have staff there that'll answer within 24 hours. So a lot of support built into the program. At the bottom of the page, you will find there's a lot of information there. If you have any questions, you can email us, which is info@nightlightastrology.com. In terms of questions about the program and what it includes or what have you. Everything you should need, all the information is on the page. But at any rate, at the bottom, you'll find the enrollment options. Early Bird saves you $500 off. There is a 12-month payment plan. That is a really good idea for people who want to just spread the payments out, make them a little bit more manageable. But the main thing I want to make sure people know of is that we still have room in our need-based tuition program, which means for people who need a slightly lower price point to work within a tight budget, you don't want to spread yourself too thin. We get it. We don't think anyone should be priced out of studying astrology. And so if you could benefit from the need-based tuition assistance, that's just going to give you a sliding scale to work within for monthly tuition. Those are limited. There will be fewer of them as we get closer to the time of enrollment. So apply now, and be sure to check your spam folder if you don't hear from us within 24 hours, because we respond quickly, and sometimes we respond and people don't hear from us, and that's because it often goes into your promotions folder or spam or something like that. But at any rate, I hope to see some of you in class soon. All right, let's take a look at this eclipse, and I'm going to talk about cosmic disappointment, cosmic sense of injustice. This is not uncommon for an eclipse in Libra. I remember the last time that we had eclipses in Libra, we were just looking back at some of those previous Libran eclipses, and I was thinking back about, all that was happening and the feeling that well, sometimes you just feel like the universe is taking a dump on your head. You're like, this is unfair. And you would think that with Libran eclipses, everything should feel so fair and balanced. So why is it that sometimes, and I'm not talking now about the psychological characteristics of people who have sun or moon in Libra. I'm talking about Libra as a sign that signifies the entrance of the sun into the underworld, which was associated with the judgment of the soul. For example, one of the myths that is frequently associated with Libra is the Egyptian Hall of Mot, where the heart is weighed against, I think it's an ostrich feather. And the idea being that if your heart is metaphorically lighter than a feather, you pass through this kind of purgatory space and ascend to a better lifetime or a better world or something like that. I don't remember exactly how it went, but that's the idea. And the underworld is a space where, most of the time when you hear stories about the underworld, it's like you can't take anything with you down there, and you're sort of stripped naked, and you go down naked as you came into this world, naked you go out of it, in a sense. So it's a place that's associated with death in the solar year. But not just death, but the evaluation of the fruits and activities of our lives. In internal evaluation more than external. There's many people who live lives where, on the external side, it looks like you made a lot of mistakes. But on the internal side, there's been a huge amount of reform and healing and growth. So we're not talking about, when we talk about karma from the Libran point of view, we're talking about the evaluation of the soul. And this is an archetype. I'm not trying to suggest that you buy into some paradigm where you should be concerned about the judgment of your soul 24/7. What I'm talking about is that felt archetypal sense that there is something like a harvest, and that there is something like cosmic or karmic balance, harmony, that actions are weighed, and that things are measured, and that results are orchestrated in a mysterious way, and that somehow the way that things are orchestrated represents a kind of universal balancing principle, the sign of the balance. Now, I think for many of us, this is like a hard pill to swallow, because the inequality that we deal with on the human level. I mean, let's just speak before we even get into some of the heaviest ways in which inequality play out in our world through, systematic oppression and the way that certain groups of people are treated by other groups of people and so forth. We get to an even more basic fact that people are not, although there's always been in most religious traditions a sense that on the level of the spirit or soul we are all equal, we are all sparks of the divine, and in that sense we're somehow the same, we're one. There's also been the very obvious way in which we are anything but the same, from the principle of individuality and sort of the unique creative snowflake theory. We're each so unique, utterly unique. At the same time, we're all fundamentally equal in divine dignity. And when you look at it from that standpoint, it's actually sort of breathtaking and beautiful that there would be sameness and difference at once. But the problem that sameness and difference at once also creates is this feeling of things at times being unequal. And that's like a shadow that we're always dealing with. And this is the way that ancient mystics thought about things. There were all sorts of opposites, and opposites didn't have just one way of relating to one another. There were fundamentally different ways that opposites had of relating to one another. Opposites had, as a like paradigmatic way that opposites related, had its own opposite. Opposites could be fundamentally opposed to one another and incapable of moving toward or transforming or existing along a spectrum with one another. They were opposed as differences that absolutely could not be changed. Light is not dark and dark is not light, and so forth. Evil is not good and good is not evil, and so forth. You are not me and I am not you, and like that. And then there's a way in which ancients thought that opposites could relate to one another along a spectrum. Masculine and feminine could exist along a spectrum. Light and dark, good and evil. There's a fluidity in a way in which opposites can relate that are very fluid. So there's a shadow that can come with everything when we think about the idea of the universe being a perfectly balanced place where some kind of cosmic harmony is the underlying principle of everything. It only makes sense that there would also be an experience of disunity, discordance, chaos, or inequality. And so this is somehow the way in which these ancient mystics viewed the universe, that the universe's creative potency has to do with the fact that it is this interplay of opposites, which at times the existence of these opposites and the play of light and dark and equality and inequality is just brutally painful to experience. And if you try to deny that, you're just not being real, And at other times, the interplay of light and dark is the occasion for religious, like epiphany or religious experience or ecstasy. It's like when you see it at play and you somehow accept it all, that seems to be the common ground for mystical experience. But it's really hard to do. It's easy to talk about it. You know what I mean? On a podcast, right? It's different when it's like your life. We're born with a sense of inequality that is very basic and mundane. For example, I remember as a kid, there were some kids who could just run faster than I could, and it wasn't like they trained, we're in the third grade. There's people who could just do the mile run quicker than I could, There have been people I remember in school, who just got math better than me, but I was often one of the best readers. I don't know. There's people that have all sorts of skills and abilities that some people wish they had that don't come naturally, while they come naturally to other people who don't even care that they have them. So life is like this. There's all of these different inequalities, or there's this way in which nothing is really the same. James Hillman liked to say, we're not walking around on ground that is perfectly flat and in nice geometric shapes. The earth is it's a patchy place with a lot of uneven terrain and different kinds of textures and substances that we walk on and through that surround us, and the environment is not a place that moves around in, like, at least our experience is not that it is like some perfect geometric field. You know what I mean? Like walking through a beautiful art museum where everything is, perfectly like shaped, and even the strange arrangements feel somehow symmetrical and tidy. Life is not tidy like that. And I think when eclipses come through Libra, as I was reflecting back on previous cycles, one of the things that often happens is there is a deep feeling that comes over us at times. There's opposite feelings we'll talk about, especially in tomorrow's talk. But one of the feelings that comes over us is like, this isn't fair. Something has happened that has tipped the scales, and maybe something that I was working toward or hoping for or aiming or intending or willing myself toward, it just doesn't work. I don't get what I thought I was going to get. The outcome is not the one I wanted. And more than that, the outcome might be a disaster. There could be a sense of the scales going boom in a really dramatic way, one that to us suddenly feels like we're being like accosted or cosmically persecuted even. There's a deep sense with Libra, there can be, that things are tragically unfair, you know? So there are other Libran experiences. That is not the only Libran experience. Another very common Libran experience is like reaping what you've sown. There's a Libra is so there's so many times with Libra energy, Libran transits, where you go, I put in the work and I got the medal. Like I exercised virtue and people liked me, like that. But there is this deeper level at which cosmic karmic cycles are at play. Extremes and opposites and patterns are being tempered, and it's too big, it's too much, it's too intricate, it's too mysterious for us to understand. And so it can feel really trite when people sort of, they look at these moments from afar, maybe especially when we're not experiencing one, but someone around us is, and we say, like, don't you understand the deeper, like, just let go, man, just surrender, and there's nothing more obnoxious than someone sitting on a high horse telling you to just accept a very deep feeling of unfairness that's permeating your life. It's like not very cool. I don't even want to, it's like, there's part of me that's like, you don't have to do anything with that feeling of unfairness. You don't have to do anything with it. It doesn't need to be solved or fixed. And there could be a very real sense in which something is unfair. And you don't have to force it to be more than that. It's like, not everything needs to be a mural of hope that we paint up on a rusty side of a building. It's like, you don't have to do anything. You just feel unfair and you can just be with it. I think most of us want to understand what's happening. We want to understand why, or at the very least, we want to work through and come out of a place where we're feeling sort of tortured, by experience, or we're feeling like somehow the scales have tipped dramatically. Like, we don't want to stay in a place that feels stuck or resentful or bitter, or we don't want to stay feeling like we've been victimized. Most of us don't, and that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy to flip the scales or to understand why something is happening or to move through that state. I think most of us want to at some point. We're ready to at some point. So what are some of the things that ancient mystics who practiced astrology told us about what we ought to do when life feels unfair? And I think these are good ones. I wouldn't share them with you guys if I thought that they were trite BS. Do you know what I mean? So I can't say that I am in touch with these things, especially not when I'm in a state of feeling like something's unfair. And believe me, as Mars has moved through Libra, I've had some really deep moments of being like, this just feels unfair to me, and just stuff going on, in my own life. And I know that there are people out there who are dealing with things that feel unfair on a scale that I can't imagine, right? So just to like tip my cap to all of you who are going through stuff that, maybe a lot of us listening to this can't imagine. Number one is to start with the pain, but stay honest and stay with the pain or the disappointment. There's a way in which in so many different religious and spiritual traditions around the world have taught us this, that the pain is the answer. It's not anywhere else. If we can just stay in this feeling, I am hurt, I'm disappointed, I'm frustrated, I feel sad, I feel angry, I feel like this isn't fair. Stay there. You don't have to stay there forever, but sometimes that experience is what we need to have. Or maybe need is too strong a word. That experience can do more for us than we think. Have you ever seen the way kids, if you have kids, they process emotions just like this? My daughter, my 5-year-old, when she gets angry, instead of going up to her and going, "Why are you angry?" Which often makes her more anxious or more angry, or trying to fix it or solve it. If I can kind of get down on her level, my wife Ashley's really good at this, and I just get down there and I go, "You're really upset right now. I can tell that you're really, really mad," and it just kind of trying to open up a space of like validating and just letting someone feel that. It's usually really positive. Yes, I'm really mad. You know, I feel like this is really unfair. I'm really sad. I'm disappointed. I wanted something. It didn't go my way. Or something happened and I don't understand why this happened. It feels like cruel and unusual punishment. Like I don't get it. Stay with it. Don't go anywhere. Just let yourself feel that. And maybe maybe if it's really, really strong, like maybe you need to go for a walk and feel it, or move your energy so that it doesn't become like, I don't know, sometimes for me anyway, I can get really angry when things feel unfair. And then, if I go for a walk and feel angry, it's a little bit better than just sitting and boiling until I lash out at my, Ashley or the kids or something and say something kind of, I don't know, just snappy or snippy or something. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like one of the things that, is very common in the yogic traditions, and you see Stoics saying similar things. You see Taoists saying similar things. Many of those traditions practice astrology. It looks a little different in the East and so forth, but one of the things that you see is like all things have their season, all things have their place. That doesn't mean that it feels good that all things have their season or place. It doesn't mean that you should thus not have an experience of disappointment. But if we start from the premise that like it's okay to feel really upset right now, to feel frustrated and disappointed, in my experience, if there is something, if there's some gift or blessing, some understanding, some of which may come sooner or later, it will often come because we've allowed for the experience to be what it is and not tried to move it into something else. And I bet you guys can relate. How many of us don't like it when we're upset and someone tells us what we ought to do to get out of being upset as opposed to just listening? Can we just hold space for ourselves to be like, this feels unfair. This doesn't feel good. I'm disappointed with the outcome. Number 2 is humble acceptance. Humble acceptance to me is not like, again, it's not some trite, I don't know, overly confident Course in Miracles certainty about the just so-ness and just rightness of every last phenomenon. Just you don't just walk. You can tell who's annoyed me in the past. Oh gosh, but you just, for me, humble acceptance is very similar to what we're saying about staying honest and staying with the pain or disappointment. It's this like, I'm not in control of this. I'm not in control of what just happened or how things turned out. I don't have to understand why. I don't have to understand it like cosmically why this can happen. I don't have to understand why it happened to me. I don't have to understand what I did to make it happen or what I didn't do to make it happen or who's to blame or who's not to blame. There's no cosmic calculus that I have to figure out. I can just start with to me, humble acceptance is like, well, shit. Like, well, what am I going to do about that? Nothing. And I think acceptance is not a heroic act. I think it's a very common, quiet, simple act of saying, okay. And I'm still probably going to feel upset and frustrated and angry in waves. But, the waves as they roll through, occasionally I'm just going to go like, fuck it. Like, okay. All right. Number 3 is moderate and compassionate self-reflection. When I say moderate and compassionate, I don't mean, because I just said you don't have to figure anything else out. You don't have to figure out why it happened or what you did to make it happen, or you don't have to look for the lesson. But you could. You could look for a lesson if you wanted to, if it felt useful. I think most of the time we don't go looking for a lesson. I feel like when things like this occur and there's a feeling like things didn't go the way I wanted them to go, I didn't get what I want, the outcome is not only not what I wanted, but it's something that feels kind of unfair or shitty to me. I feel picked on. I feel like a victim of forces or people or circumstances. It feels pretty yucky. You can take a moment if you want to, moderately, compassionately, gently. You can say, how did I participate in the creation of this result? And there doesn't need to be one answer like, there it is. I've cracked the code. And now with this newfound knowledge of my flaws, I shall move to level 11, I shall ascend the ladder. It'll become an evolutionary level above what I was when I began in herd consciousness. So we don't have to go seeking the answer to why we created this or how we played a role. Instead, we can think about our own actions, our own attitudes, our own dispositions, our own karmic history, so to speak, and we may find insight. But insight is not the same as an answer, the answer. It's not the same as certainty, which certainly tends to perpetuate self-righteousness, and that's not our, I don't think that's our friend. So moderate, compassionate self-reflection, where multiple possible insights into our own participatory role may emerge, maybe. Right? That kind of approach. Number 4, seeking justice with a firm but kind heart. When unfair things happen, it is possible that someone is to blame. Someone has taken advantage of us. Someone has harmed us. We've become a victim of a force that needs us to do or say something about it. That's appropriate. I mean, I'm all about compassion and forgiveness, but if you have, if someone's showing sexual harassment at work, maybe you need to speak up, say something, go to HR, whatever the right path is. There are times when people need to be held accountable, and these kinds of eclipses can bring up the feeling of injustice, but also the need to speak truth to power or to say something or do something that can help, that is somehow corrective. Like we may become an instrument of cosmic justice. How do we do that without becoming inflated by being part of that? I think sometimes people, like one of the things that I think we have to be really careful of is it's like, when someone does something, they may need to be sued, for example. But if they're like in an accident, let's say someone's at fault and they need to be sued, and that's like, maybe that is the best thing that needs to happen. How can we participate in that process without feeling, sort of like our ego is getting some kind of dark empowerment by being the punitive hand of justice? Do you know what I mean? There's a compassionate, firm, but like disentangled way in which we can seek justice. And I think that's probably always the best path. You seek justice, but you do so without vindictiveness or cruelty or an identification with the power of justice itself. Like, I am that power. That's the trap that we can fall into with eclipses like this, because they will bring up injustice, and sometimes then we get identified with the power of that process, which will become corrosive to our hearts and souls in time. Number 5 would be to find creative opportunities. I was watching, I don't know, how they have all these shorts now that pop up on YouTube. And I watch a lot of sports podcasts because that's kind of one of my hobbies is I follow all the Minnesota sports teams. And this guy popped up, and he's a famous like motivational, I think he's like a former Navy SEAL or something. His name is literally Jocko. Okay. I just couldn't, I was like, wow, that's like, and he looks like kind of what you would expect, like super meaty dude. And I'd never heard of this person before I saw this short. And then I watched a few more clips and I was like, okay, this isn't really my jam, but I was just curious because there was one clip that came up and he was talking about, in being in the military or something. And someone was like, we don't have this special kind of equipment. Like, it's a problem. And he goes, good. And then all people would present him with these other problems and he would go, good. And what he went on to articulate was that where there's a problem, there's an opportunity for a creative solution. And I just liked how he was sort of like defiantly, optimistic about problems. That was the only piece of it that I really liked, just because I find that I can be like that at times. And it's really helpful for me, or it has been at times, not all the time, but so it's like sometimes when these things come up, the best possible thing we can do is we're telling you guys to act like this Jocko guys feel so stupid. I'm sorry. But yeah, like you could get a little Jocko, whatever, this Navy SEAL dude, and you can be like, good. No, I don't mean quite like that. I mean, it's sort of similar, but I guess the idea is that, what comes to my mind is there was a show that I watched a long time ago called Lost. Do you guys remember that show? It took place on like an island, and they were all trying to figure out like where their plane crashed on the island, and then it was like a very weird magical island. They were all trying to figure out why they were there and get off it and so forth. Well, there was this one thing I'll just never, and some of the characters were like named after philosophers too. And I don't remember which ones were which, but there was a kind of an old man and he had found something and he was just sitting with it. And they were like, everyone was kind of troubled by what this object was, or like, maybe it was like a pod and they were trying to get into it or something. And he was just sitting with it. And he goes like, well, why are you sitting with it? And he goes, I like to sit with problems because there's always, if you sit with it long enough, and just sit with it, then the answer appears. And I feel like that's what's so cool. I mean, honestly, I so resonate with that. It's sort of similar to being like, there's a problem. Oh, good. Interesting. Because when there's problems in like big moments in our lives that feel unjust, I consider to be problematic, so they sit in front of you and you go like, well, what am I going to do about this? And if you just sit with it and you kind of look at it like, oh, interesting, good. Because that if you sit with a problem long enough, for most of us, you had experiences like this, suddenly the answer as to not only how to work through the problem, but why it's there, will just appear. And it's not the same as, it is never, to me, sometimes it will dovetail with like, how did I participate in creating this? But that has such a moral connotation. And I'm not really talking about the problem having a moral core that we need to like unpack or pull out somehow. Rather, what I'm talking about is that when things come up like this, the initial like, oh, I'm so frustrated, I don't like this. Yeah, but when you kind of get past that, then the problem sits there and you sit with it, and all of a sudden the reason for this problem, as well as maybe the appropriate way of dealing with it, sort of rise to the surface. And I just feel like you're learning some kind of cosmic origami. It's like you're this thing is can be moved around and reshaped creatively, and it can serve as like a creative catalyst for something else if you stay patient and curious and you sort of stay with the problem, but also have a little bit of ability to depersonalize it. And I'm not suggesting this works all the time or that there isn't like a stage in which you need to like have a personally painful, relationship to what's happened. But then you can get to a space where you just depersonalize and you sit with the problem like it's this weird Rubik's cube that's dropped out of the cosmos and into your lap. And then you go like, huh. And then, and so good. Oh, and now let me sit and sit with it. And then suddenly it's like the riddle of the Sphinx. And I love that. Like, I love being able to look at life events in different ways. First, personal, spiritual, emotional, processing of trauma, of grief, and there's so many different ways of working with problems. But then there's also this way where it's like like a hermetic object that's been dropped into your life, and you have to keep turning it and looking at it. And the more you do, all of a sudden you see that it is actually, maybe there's a little like a inner sanctum that you move into, and then that's just filled with creative potential. Do you know what I mean? Does anyone? Anyway, the rest of the day I'm going to be thinking about all my YouTube listeners who will curiously go look at who is Jocko, being like, oh Adam. Anyway, but he's not my jam. This was just one of those little shorts that popped up. But I like that he was like, problem? Good. I was like, because sometimes that's how I get too, and I can appreciate that attitude, but not in the sense of like, good, give me 3,000 push-ups or something like that. Anyway. Oh, I hope you guys are having a good one. And at least we ended on a slightly comical note, considering the difficulty of the topic for the day. We're going to revisit this again tomorrow from a slightly different perspective. I thought we'd end on a higher note for Friday, dig into the muck and mire a little bit more today. So that's it. I hope you guys are having a good one. We'll see you again soon. Bye.